insurance. I think that's the best way to deal with it.
All right. One more question for you on the education topic. As I'm sure you're well aware, there have been 4 suicides in Tucson just this school year. Not within TUSD in particular, but just in the city of Tucson. And those suicides were a result of bullying. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about the problem of bullying, and what do you think should or could be done about it?
You know, it's a problem. I mean, you know, when we were in school, everybody dealt with bullies. I think the dynamic has changed a little bit now. Again, these issues I think are best dealt with locally by parents, by the school board, maybe by their churches and whatnot. Teaching kids how to deal with bullies is probably something that needs to be done. It's also, you know, an issue of the teachers being involved and understanding their kids, and the parents knowing and understanding their kids. But I don't think government needs to start dictating down from the federal level how to deal with a problem like that. I think, again, it's best done locally, tailored for the specific needs of the community and the school district or the kids that are involved, and not some bureaucrat 2,000 miles away coming up with another expensive program that may not have the results that everybody wants and takes those resources away that could be best used locally to deal with the problem.
All right, let's talk a little bit about the economy, your number one issue for Southern Arizona. If you had to list maybe 3 things that you think would kickstart the economy or get it back to where it should be, what would those be?
Well, when I got elected to the Arizona legislature, we put a moratorium on rule and regulatory making, and it's worked rather well. A lot of problems that you have with these large federal agencies is they get into this mindset that they have to create regulations to justify their existence. And what that does for businesses is it keeps moving the goalpost, and you have businesses spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to comply with regulations and write reports that really nobody even reads in many cases. We've got to do something about the regulation. That compliance tax to comply with those regulations is an unbelievable burden on business. We have to reel those regulations back. The next thing we have to do is we have to reduce the corporate income tax. We now have the highest corporate tax in the world. Japan actually cut their corporate income taxes to try to get their economy going. We have to do the same. And we have to provide an incentive for businesses to invest. Right now, businesses are afraid. They don't know what the future holds. They're worried about Obamacare. They're worried about more tax increases. They're worried about all these changes that the government wants to make. And instead of investing their money and putting it at risk by doing so, they'd rather hold on to it. And that is causing stagnation, and it's not creating jobs. We have got to encourage investment by eliminating the R&D taxes that people pay when they try to do research and development and expanding their business. We should encourage business expansion. We should encourage research and development in technology. That's what creates high-tech jobs, high-wage jobs. And we're doing the exact opposite. We're making it so difficult for companies to do that many of them are leaving the United States and going overseas. And we have to reverse that trend, or our country will not be able to survive economically.
All right. You mentioned Obamacare. Let's talk a little bit about health care now. How would you reform our health care system? What do you think we should do?
Well, you know, I believe in the free market. And, you know, look at your home insurance, your car insurance, your life insurance. I mean, there's government protection in there for consumer protection issues, but for the most part, it's a free market. Insurance companies compete. You don't see a lot of health care insurance commercials on TV. You see car insurance commercials all the time. Oh, our rates are better than their rates. Oh, come to us. We'll show you our competitors' rates. Come to us. We offer all these extra coverage. We bundle. We do this. And that's what we need with healthcare. We need to allow the insurance companies out there to offer different types of plans for different types of people. I mean, large families may need a different plan than a single person. We need to allow across state lines competition where people in Arizona can buy insurance in North Dakota or South Carolina, and when you move from job to job to job, your insurance goes with you. So every time you move to a different state, you don't have to get new health insurance. So that's some of the stuff we could do. We could do a lot to create competition and drive down costs. The other thing we have to do is put consumerism back in the healthcare decision. I have an HSA. It is the most liberating thing you can ever imagine. Walking into a doctor's office and they ask you for all this insurance stuff and you go, no, you pull out your HSA credit card and you say, I'm paying with cash. You know, I have a high deductible insurance, and I have TRICARE if something terrible were to happen to me. But for all the routine medical visits, we use a credit card, my family and I. And we go in there and we don't have to get consults, referrals. We can just walk in and get our service. And while doing that, I can say I want certain things and I'm willing to pay for this, and certain things I'm not willing to pay for, because up until a certain point, you know, it's coming out of my pocket. So that allows me to create competition, and I look for doctors that provide a service cheaper than other doctors or better than other doctors, and it puts that consumerism back in. We don't have that now. People go in, they have a low deductible, or in some cases no deductible at all, and they just go in and they let doctors run all these tests, they get all these extra procedures, they get all these extra things done, and that jacks up costs. So once you get the consumerism back in and people shop for health insurance and use shopping for their health care like they do when buying a car and their car insurance, I think you'll see a dramatic decrease in the cost.
All right. Your position on the bill that's in our legislature here in Arizona that would allow employers to opt out of the birth control coverage based on specific reasons. Talk to us about your feelings on that.
That is being, again, twisted by certain groups. This is a freedom issue. The government's role is to draw a line between your liberty and someone else's. As Thomas Jefferson says, your liberty ends where the other guy's nose begins. So you have two competing interests here. You have an employer who pays a significant amount of money for health care for his employees, and he has a moral objection to certain things. Should the government force him to take money out of his pocket to do something he doesn't believe in? On the other side, you have people that think they're entitled to certain health coverage. And do you think the government should say, okay, you have this entitlement? I mean, that is the dilemma. I would tend to say that, look, for an employer, if an employer doesn't even want to offer health insurance, I don't think the government should make him offer health insurance. If he wants to offer health insurance as an incentive to hire people to come and work for his business, that's one thing. But to mandate them to do that, I think is wrong. That is not government's role. It should be up to the employer. If he wants to offer certain types of coverage, certain levels of coverage, certain categories of coverage, it should be up to the guy that's paying the bill for that coverage.
All right. Let's talk a little bit about just one question on this topic, and that is the president's plan to take our troops out of Afghanistan by 2014. Obviously, you have a lot of experience in our combat zones.
I spent a lot of time in Afghanistan.
Yeah. So what what do you think about, one, the announcement of the timeline, and two, about the plan to do it?
Well, little history here. I was involved in Afghanistan back in the 80s during what's now known as Charlie Wilson's War. I was part of the American advisors that were over there training the Mujahideen to fight the Soviet Union. And if you saw the movie Charlie Wilson, at the end there was this nice little quote about how they screwed up the end game by pulling out and not being there to create the stability, and anarchy ensued. The Taliban took control. They then brought in al-Qaeda and they gave them safe harbor, and then they launched attacks on the United States that killed 3,000 Americans. We have to be careful how our exit strategy is put into effect here. I'm all for pulling our troops out as long as it doesn't create another unstable environment where the ISI from Pakistan can come back in, bring the Taliban back in, and allow them to once again build bases of operations where they can export terror to the rest of the world. We cannot allow that to happen. But I don't have any heartburn if the commanders on the ground and the military strategists have a plan and they say, this is our plan for transitioning Afghanistan and making sure it's stable and there aren't conditions that are going to allow the Taliban or al-Qaeda to come back in there, and then I would support it. But just to yank troops out with some artificial timeline, I think it's a mistake.
All right. Now to some of our viewer questions,
Sure.
and we have several. A few questions regarding the budget, so here we go. John Gorman, one of our viewers, wants to know, would you have voted for the budget proposal that passed the House? It's been a little more than a week ago now. That would be the Ryan budget. And how would you balance the budget?
I would have supported the Ryan budget. The Ryan budget is not as dramatic and as some people try to say, radical. You know, they're trying to paint it as a radical budget. What I think is radical is stealing from our children and our grandchildren's future at $50,000 a second. That is radical, borrowing that kind of money. Paul Ryan, in the budget that he proposed, would take 20 years to balance the budget. 20 years. It isn't that big, dramatic reduction in spending. In Arizona, we reduced spending 22% in 3 years. Paul Ryan's budget's about 2%. I don't think it's really that much to ask the government of this country to scale back its size by 2% and reduce spending. It's a reasonable thing. It also has a scaled back simplification of the tax code component where they create 2 tax brackets, which I also think it's a good thing. Everybody that benefits from the liberty that this country provides should be a shareholder in this country, and everyone should pay taxes based on a percentage of their income. And I think going to a flat tax, or even as Paul Ryan is trying to do, simplify the tax code, is the direction we need to go to. A low, broad tax is the best thing for our country, not this progressive tax code that pits winners and losers and producers versus consumers. And I think it's wrong. I don't think the Founding Fathers ever intended that. And that's why they put in our original Constitution a prohibition to the income tax, because they saw what would likely be what we have today, and they didn't like that idea. I think we need to go back to simplifying our tax code, and Paul Ryan is going in the right direction. He is trying to put this country on the road to prosperity. It is clear that the President of the United States and the budget that he proposed, which no one in either party supported, was going to put this country on the road to ruin. And I would much rather be on the road to prosperity than the road to ruin.
All right. Richard Snow, another one of our viewers, wants to know, are you in favor of bringing much needed federal funds for bridges and roads to southern Arizona?
We pay a lot of money on the gasoline tax. 18 cents of every tank that you fill up goes to the federal government. Another 18 cents goes to the state. I think that the federal government needs to relook at its transportation funding formula for the interstate systems in this country. They've been divvying it up by population. They should do it by road miles. Arizona has a lot of roads, except we have a small population. So we unfortunately aren't receiving, in my opinion, a fair apportionment of those highway dollars to maintain the miles and miles of roads that we have to maintain. Even though our population is small, a lot of people drive through Arizona from California going east and vice versa going to California. And we should have a more fair system of disbursement of those funds. So yeah, I would support to try to ensure that we get transportation infrastructure funding so that Arizona is on par with the rest of the country.
All right. Donald Woolley says, would you be in favor of modifying the current medical, retirement, and related benefit packages received by congressional members and their staff and replacing those with Social Security and health care packages that are similar to those provided by small private employers?
Sure. I mean, putting the members of Congress into the same boat as everybody else is a great idea. Here in Arizona, we have a citizens legislature. And the reason they have that is so that when I leave Phoenix and I go back to work at my day job, and I have to work with the constituents that I've represented for the last 4 months, they let me know if I did something right or I did something wrong. I have to work in the environment that I created. I have to deal with people that are impacted by the decisions I made. And I think it's a very effective tool to make sure that I stay grounded when I go back to Phoenix in the next session. By putting Congress on the same par with everybody else, there's tons of health care plans. They don't need a special health care plan. They can get a health insurance plan. They can get a HSA like I have, and they can get a 401k. I think we should do away with it altogether. Allow them to put a portion in a 401k like many businesses offer today and get the government out of the pension business and out of the health care business altogether. And I would support it 100%.
All right. On to politics now. Virginia Cornell says, citizens are tired of partisan gridlock in Washington. What will you do to work with your opponents to get laws and appointments passed? Well,
there's this perception created, in some part by the media, that, partisanship is bad. In many cases, it's not. If you look at what we had here in Arizona, we had a bipartisan budget in 2007 and a bipartisan budget in 2008, signed by a governor that was a Democrat, and you had a Republican legislature, and it was both Republican and Democrat votes, and then eventually the Democrat governor that signed that budget, and it got us a $3 billion hole in our budget. We had bipartisanship in Washington, both Republicans and Democrats, spending money that this country just could not afford, and look what it's gotten us now, almost a $16 trillion debt. We have got to get people up there of either party that are fiscally conservative and can curtail and contain the spending. And if it means getting all Republicans up there, or even fiscally conservative Democrats, I don't mind working with fiscally conservative Democrats. I've worked with Democrats in the legislature on a whole variety of bills. There are things we agree on, but then there are some things we disagree on, and those fundamental differences are what makes this country so great, I guess you can say, because we work those differences out through the electoral process. So if you get enough fiscal conservatives up there, you know, we can get a budget passed. We can break this gridlock by winning elections and getting people up there that want to save this country financially and want to balance the budget and want to cut spending.
All right, last question is from Roger Score. He says, this election is to represent Southern Arizona. How well are you connected with current mayors, sheriffs, and the state legislature?
Well, I know them all. You know, there's some I know better and have relationships better than others. Again, the political dynamic in Southern Arizona is very unique. I have a lot of support from my colleagues in the legislature for this run. I'm looking forward to unifying local, county, state, and federal offices where we can all work together as one big team. And fighting for Southern Arizona at every level is something that I look forward to. We really haven't had that over the last couple years. It would be nice to have someone in Washington that would work with our state officials, work with our county guys, and then work with our local guys to do good things for the people of Southern Arizona. And I know them well. You know, the mayors in my district, as well as the sheriffs, and I've talked to several of them, and some of them and I have had spirited discussions, but that's the beauty of the system. But I look forward to working with all of them and representing them well, and again, representing Southern Arizona as an elected team.
All right, that'll do it.
Well, thanks.
Frank, appreciate it.
Thanks.
Yeah.
All right.
That's it.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
I knew 3 of those people.
Did you?
I knew Roger Score.
That's funny.
I actually ran a bill for him this year in the legislature.
Really?
Yeah, and he owns an alarm company, and he's in a big battle with the city of Tucson, so I ran a bill that would preempt cities from establishing alarm licenses on alarm business.